In this video, I'm going to show you how to design and build your own custom built-ins. So a few months ago, a friend of ours was looking for some custom built-ins for her home, and she had seen the cabinets we built here, and so was looking for a similar solution. And I designed and built a very similar set of built-in cabinets for her home. Now she already had the lowers in place, so I only had to design the uppers, but it was a unique custom solution for her home. And so over the course of the next 3 videos, I'm going to show you how I did that. So in this first video, I'm going to go over how to design and dimension, how to come up with the plans for that sort of cabinet. And in the second video, I'll show you behind the scenes of what tools I used and the machinery methods I used to put the cabinets together. And in the third video, I'll show you how I finished them, what finishing products I used, and how I got the paint finish I was looking for. And then if you're still looking for some more in-depth instruction on how to design and build your own custom built-ins or even kitchen cabinets, I have the Cabinets from Scratch video course. And so I'm going to be opening enrollment for that right now, and it's going to be permanently open, so you can sign up and take the course whenever you feel like you're ready to learn more about building your own cabinets. So let's get started with this first video. So let's talk quickly about dimensioning these things. So the widths are designed to fit in the space between the wall and the fireplace on the left side and the fireplace and the wall on the right side. The heights, the homeowners wanted some space between the top of the cabinet and the ceiling. So they didn't want these to go right to the ceiling. They have some really nice crown molding up top that's original to the home. And we're going to add some crown molding to this cabinet, and we wanted them to have some separation. So the height was sort of arbitrarily selected to be someplace above some of the window work, but below the ceiling. So that's where the height came up. The width of and the parts and the dimensioning of the boards on here. This board is about 7 inches wide or so. There's going to be a 1/2 inch strip that'll be hidden by a piece of crown molding. Okay, I can show you what that'll look like. Let's go off camera here for a second. But we're just using standard sort of Lowe's, Home Depot, OG crown molding, or whatever this stuff is, right? And it's going to sit right there. And all the stuff is still being painted. Nothing's done yet. The shelves are still being primed. The shelves are primed. The cabinet only has 1 coat of paint on it, so that'll need more paint. So the width of these boards are about 3.5 inches wide. And I selected that width to match the width of the same portions of the cabinet that are in the lower boxes. So we wanted them to look sort of continuous, like when they were built and installed. They were all built at the same time. So the cabinet has this wider piece up top here. So again, you have your crown molding, and you'll have a big section here. The homeowner wants to add some sconce lights. So they actually were able to pick out some sconce lights on Amazon.com, and I looked at those links, and the one light they're buying, or the light they're buying has an electrical plate, like a little diameter about 5 or 6 inches. So when that lands on here, I think they want 2 of them, so they'll have 1 here and 1 over here, or 1 in the middle. I needed to leave a space for that electrical plate to be mounted and to be centered, taking into account that the crown molding would be there. All right, so that's why that's so wide. So once the lights are on there, that'll look pretty nice. So again, that's where the widths of these things came from. The box components, the sides, the top, which you really can't see too well, are built out of plywood. Plywood is nice because it's inexpensive for box components. It comes in a big 4x8 sheet, and I can cut it. It's dimensionally stable. It takes paint well. This is birch plywood. The hardwood I'm using for the rails and for the stiles of this cabinet are poplar. We select poplar because poplar takes paint well. It's not really a good staining paint or a staining species of wood. It's still a hardwood, so it's hard like an oak or a cherry or a maple, and it's not soft like a pine or a fir. You don't want to use pines or firs generally when you're building cabinets, unless you want that knotty pine really naughty, that pine softwood look that's more common in sort of log homes, or that's fine. But for painted projects, if you're going to paint it, generally stick with maple or poplar. You'll get a much more durable wood, and it takes paint great. So if they wanted something stained, like cherry or like a walnut finish, then we would select a species that took stain well. So walnut, cherry, maple, oak, those would all be stain grade woods. But this is a paint grade project. I included a strip of wood back here that runs along the back, and I'll show you the back side of the other cabinet. We'll sort of do like a little investigation of what this looks like. This will allow me to secure the cabinet to the wall. So if there's some 2x4s in the wall, this strip, this is a screw strip. I can sink my screws into here and anchor the cabinet to the wall, and I can also drive those through the sideboards. When I went to measure this, and this is sort of a tip that it's sort of traditionalist, I suppose. So when you're measuring between a wall, especially like in an alcove where you have the wall go in, and you need to measure between the wall and the fireplace, and that's what I had to do in this case. What most people try to do would be to take a piece of, take a measuring tape and try to push this against the wall, maybe have a friend hold that end, and then try to see where this ends up over here. And you could do that, and it's not a terrible idea. Another method you could use is called a storyboard. Storyboard is just a piece of wood that we know is relatively straight. And what I do, and in this case, in their home, I took a level, okay, like a 2-foot level. I taped it on the edge of this, and then I butted this against the wall, and then I used a pencil in my free hand to mark where the edge of the fireplace wall met the board. Okay, and then all I did was annotate a note that this is the width of the left alcove. So when I got home, I could just take my tape measure on the board and just measure what the board had, and I know that mark is the exact width. So the alternative would be, again, to use my measuring tape, take out a book and write down the measurement I got, measure it in 3 places, hope I get that right. With a board and a level, you kind of have, this storyboard tells the story of what their space is. So for one side of the board, I used on the left alcove. The other side of the board I used on the right alcove, and I just took notes. And then, you could use it for vertical measurements, for horizontal measurements. When people design and build kitchen cabinets, a lot of traditional carpenters, they'll go in your home after all the cabinets are out and the walls are done, and they'll install a storyboard along the whole length of the wall. And they'll just talk with the homeowner. Okay, well, I want a 15-inch cabinet here. So they'll measure out 15 inches on the board, draw a line, and say 15-inch cabinet. And from the other line, they'll draw another mark, and they'll write in here, this is where the sink's going to go. So then they take that board back to their shop, and they have a layout on their board of exactly how that wall of cabinets is going to be laid out. And then from there, they can kind of go in and see where all their other components are. So that's how the genesis of these cabinets showed up. Is, the lengths were determined, all the dimensions were picked by a combination of what looks best in that space, and then what is the traditional best method for putting this stuff together, allowing for the features they wanted, like the lights. So, this stuff wasn't pulled out of thin air. It was a combination of talking to that family and discussing what they want, and then sort of combining that with, my knowledge of just what works best for cabinets. So we'll take a step back from here, and I'm going to turn this cabinet around, and I'll show you what this looks like from the back side, so you can see sort of the joinery method we use to put this together. So that'll help you get an idea of, oh, that's how that works. So you can kind of see, you're looking at the front face of this cabinet, but it'll give you an idea more of like what's under the hood in this thing. All right, so let's take a break and we'll turn this around. Okay, so this is the back of that built-in cabinet. And so I wanted to show you sort of a cross-section of this. So this sideboard here, this is a piece of white birch plywood. You get this at any home improvement store. And this runs your sides. I have a top piece of plywood that runs from side to side. And if you look in here, I have a little groove that I bored out in this sideboard. So this top board slides into that, and this groove exists on both this side and the other side. Since these boards are going to be hidden between the wall and the fireplace, I don't need to paint this side. It's plywood, and I can also drive some additional fasteners into this top board. So even though this got a lot of glue and there's a groove and it keeps it all together, adding some additional fasteners makes it easier, especially for keeping it together while we're moving it around the shop and all that stuff. So you could use pocket screws if you wanted to put this top board into this side board. But I like adding this groove because I can locate that groove in a definitive place. So many inches down from the top, I put my groove, and then when I put it together, I'm not sort of struggling to get this board to line up with where I need my pocket screws to go. It just sits in that groove. It gets glued in there. So the groove provides two things. It's a method of keeping this together, but it's also a method of keeping it lined up when I'm putting it together. So you can see this is my poplar board back here, this top piece here. And this extra space I have on top of here will allow them to run their electrical cables to an outlet on the wall. So this is a nice little space. They can also put some storage stuff here if they wanted to. This is a piece of hardwood board, this board here. This is plywood, I'm sorry, this is poplar. And this does have pocket screws here, and it pulls it into this sideboard. Now this board here again will allow me to secure this to the wall, and I used hardboard because one of the edges is going to be showing. This will be open to the wall. And if I had plywood here, I would have needed to hide this plywood edge with some sort of edge band material. I didn't want to do that. This is just easier. One of the nice features about a built-in Vice 8 kitchen cabinet is I have the back open. I don't have a backboard here. So number one, that's less material, it's less weight, and what they can do is, so this cabinet will sit right against the wall, and then they have the option of keeping the wall painted the same color as the built-in. They can paint the wall the same color or a different color. They can kind of have a contrast in there. So, you know, it's less material, it's cheaper, no back. That's the way to go with this. Okay, so that's sort of the guts of this thing. The face frame is put together with pocket screws. The rails are, the top horizontal board is attached to the vertical boards with some pocket screws, and everything else is just sort of wood glue. So it's not a very complicated cabinet to put together. In our next video, I will show you so we'll go over some of the tools in the next video and then putting them together so you can see where all this sort of came together. So this is sort of the finished product almost, and then we'll kind of take you back from there. All right, so in our next video, look for some of that tool discussion and the joinery methodology, and we'll see you next time.